hoping that you and I are semi the same height because adjusting this thing has been scaring the crap out of me. I've watched other people adjust it, but it was terrorizing me. Yay, success. I just had a glass of wine, and I was wondering if that was a good or a bad idea. Apparently, wine is good. All right, so I am a sibling. Not just any kind of sibling, though. I am a younger sister to an older brother, which essentially means that my childhood was lived in a constant state of getting messed with. Now, my older brother, his name is Cliff, and we were growing up in Illinois. He found a multitude of ways to mess with me. Things like luring me out onto the front porch to lock me out of the house, or pelting me with crab apples from the roof when I'm just minding my own business in the backyard. He would pin me down to the floor and hold my hands and let a long loogie dangle out just inches from my face before slurping it back in, right? Now, this is a classic older brother move, but my brother didn't always slurp it back in. There were mind games, too. My brother had this knack for convincing me to take the blame for things that I didn't even do. One time he cut up a sponge and left it in the upstairs bathroom for reasons I'm still unsure about. But he convinced me to take the blame for it, and I did, and I got grounded. And I spent the day upstairs in my bedroom looking out the window at my brother and his friends playing outside, wondering what the heck just happened. But the best, truly, was the year Cliff joined the wrestling team at school. Now, Cliff, when we were kids, he was a lot of things. He was thin and tan, two things that I was decidedly not. He could draw anything, he could climb anything, he could do tons of tricks on his dirt bike and his skateboard, but a wrestler, he wasn't. I don't think he ran a single match when he was on that team, but when he came home and practiced his moves on me and headlocks and flipping me over, yeah, he won every one of those matches. Now, I should say, in fairness, I may have instigated some of these interactions. As my mother likes to say, I was a bit of a sassy child, mouthy, one might say. So I'll take some responsibility for instigating. But when I was face down on the couch with my arms pinned behind my back and my brother's fingers in my ears, well, I cursed my fate. I cursed my brother. I fantasized about how glorious it would be to be an only child, right? Frankly, I wanted his head. I wanted him gone in whatever way possible. But of course, childhood is a complex time, isn't it? We have sometimes very contradictory emotions, and I certainly had those because while I wanted to murder my brother most of the time, I also wanted to be just like him. I know, it sounds trite, but it's true. I would tag along with him whenever he'd let me, and actually sometimes he did. We'd go over to Ken Morey's house and whip Chinese stars at the ceiling fan and then duck for cover. Oh, yeah. Older brothers, am I right? One summer, I remember he and some friends, they built a quarter pipe in front of the house. And of course, they'd go off and do cool tricks on their bikes and skateboards. And I wanted me some of that action, so I got out my scooter. Got a nice start, launched off that ramp, got some amazing air, and then landed with a really, really painful thud on the cement sidewalk. Not wanting my brother to see me cry, of course, because that wouldn't be cool, so I got up, dusted myself off, I bid my farewell, I walked inside the house, shut the door, and I burst into tears when I was sure he couldn't hear me anymore. It's so tragic. You know, and on occasions when my brother wasn't around, this is actually really embarrassing, and my brother doesn't even know this story. I would actually sneak into his closet and try on his Airwalk sneakers. They were way too big for me, of course, but I would shove toilet paper in the toes, and I would walk around and pretend that I was really good at drawing and climbing things and doing tricks on skateboards. And I know that this time, my mom, I think her heart broke to watch me go through this, and she always used to say to me, Shannon, stop competing with your brother. He's older, he's bigger. You should find the things that you're good at. And I was like, I don't want to be good at the things I'm good at. I want to be good at the things he's good at, because those are the things that he thinks are cool, right? So, of course, the situation went on like this. Brother-sister rivalry, love, hate, the normal thing. Although, I guess in our situation, it was more like idolatry and homicide, probably more appropriate. So eventually, inevitably, things came to a head. So here's the situation. I'm in the kitchen, and I'm unloading the dishwasher, right? Because I'm a very good kid. And I'm putting silverware away in a drawer, and my brother, well, he's in the kitchen too, except he's not being helpful at all. Instead, he's just in there to patronize me. So I'm putting the silverware away, and my brother's over there going, hey, Shannon, you're looking a little chubby, chubby, chubby. And I'm like, ugh, shut up, Cliff. And he's like, oh, what are you going to do about it? You want to fight? And I'm like, ugh, shut up, Cliff. And he's like, oh, you're going to cry? You're going to crawl back to your test tube? Which was actually the worst thing that he would say. That was like an insult when we were kids for whatever reason. So he was like, oh, what are you going to do? And I was like, shut up, Cliff. And he was like, chubby, chubby. And without even thinking, instinctually, I just turned and I threw whatever was in my hand right at his head to shut him up. What was in my hand happened to be a steak knife. It happened to land right in the wall just next to his eye socket. Whoa. Well, he shut up. I shut up. And we both just stood there for this long moment, letting what just happened, or what almost just happened, sink in. Now, eventually, one of us must have pulled the knife from the wall. I can't even remember. And for all the tattletaling he and I did when we were kids, neither one of us mentioned that incident to our parents. And I don't know if it was that incident in particular, to the day we moved out of that house, there was a steak knife-sized slit, like hole in the kitchen wall. You could actually put a steak knife in there and it would still prop up. It was scary. And I don't know if it was that incident in particular, or just maybe the natural order of things. But after that, we managed to figure out how to coexist without physically assaulting each other every day. And we grew up, right? We moved out of the house, went to college, he got married and started having kids, and I moved here to Maine. Woo! And of course, Cliff made fun of me for that. You're moving to Maine? Oh, you're gonna raise the population from 5 to 6, he said. Yuck, yuck. You're moving to Maine? Oh, doesn't everyone ride a moose to work there? Double yuck. God. It's a wonder that I ever came to realize that throwing that knife at his head and not killing him was actually a good thing. And then a few years ago, actually, it was Mother's Day, 2012. It was a Sunday. And my brother, he died. Poof, just like that. I remember getting this phone call from my mother, and she said, Cliff's gone. I said, gone? What does that even mean? Is this a joke? What do you mean he's gone? He just got that chip in his tooth fixed. What do you mean he's gone? We were supposed to commiserate over parenthood and argue with each other about who was going to take care of our parents when they got really old. I wanted to watch him grow a paunch and go bald and make fun of him for it. But I wasn't going to have that. He and I weren't going to have that because I didn't have a big brother anymore. And what's interesting is the next thing I thought was, did I do this? Did all those terrible things I thought and said and did when I was a kid, did they manifest themselves 10, 20, 30 years later? I mean, I was a kid. I didn't know what I was saying. I didn't really want my brother dead. And I realized that having those thoughts, it's preposterous. I understand that I'm not responsible. It's not my fault. But I still had this grating guilt that I had somehow said or done something that caused this. And I wanted to tell my friends about it, but I knew that telling them the story of the time I threw a steak knife in my brother's head, well, that wasn't going to look good for anyone. And I didn't want to talk to my parents about it because I didn't want them to know that I had said and thought and did all these really terrible things. Besides, it wasn't going to change the reality of the matter, right? The reality was Cliff is gone. And that was devastating. But you see, I actually skipped over a little part of the story, so I want to rewind for a second. Because the summer before my brother died, he came to visit me here in Maine for the first and what would turn out to be the only time. Prior to that, when I saw him, it was usually me going home to Maine, or going home to Illinois to visit my mom, my dad, my sister-in-law, my nieces, my friends, and trying to jam in all those visits with all those people in the matter of 6 or 7 days. Right? It was an impossible feat, and every time I did it, it was frustrating. And so it was during one of those frustrating visits that I remember I was saying to my brother, oh, this is so frustrating. There's just not enough time. And I said, you want some Shannon time? Then you get your butt to Maine. And he did, family and all. And it was interesting. When they first arrived, it was awkward. My nieces, Samantha and Rebecca, they looked at me like I was a stranger. I mean, I practically was. I saw them once a year, and they were so young then that they could hardly remember me from one visit to the next. And my brother, he was awkward too, right? He wasn't anything like that gangly kid that I knew when we were young. He was grown up. So was I. And so we had this really amazing week. We're making memories, and we went out on Peaks Island and rode bikes, and we drove out to Limerick to pick blueberries, and we built fairy houses on Mackworth, and we had pancake breakfast every morning. And I remember one night we were standing out, having a beer, BSing about life and work and the whole nine, and my brother looked at me and he said, I get it. I get why you live here. You have made a really awesome life for yourself. And in that moment, I realized, holy crud, I'd been waiting for my brother's approval my entire life. It didn't end when I was 15 or 20 or 30, but it wasn't until that moment when we were standing on that porch that I realized I still wanted his approval so badly. It wasn't until he was giving it that I realized I had still wanted it so badly. And in the same moment, I felt this relief, and I thought, thank God the competition is over. We don't have to compete anymore. And then, of course, it occurred to me he was probably never competing, right? That was probably me the entire time. But it was nice to know on that porch, on that summer day in Maine, that Cliff, well, he's proud of me. And it's nice to tell you on this stage here in Maine on a summer night that I am so lucky to have such an awesome big brother. Thank you.